You're trying on a bathing suit at your favorite department store. You spin around at the mirror and check yourself out. Everything looks good, but you notice a pimple on your butt. Bummer, right? Well, a few days go by and the pimple turns into a boil. You start to feel bad, lethargic, and a lot of pain coming from the boil. You decide to go to the doctor. The doctor checks you into the hospital. Then you go to the isolation ward. You're treated by a lot of specialists. You're now in trouble. You have to be treated intravenously for a MRSA staph infection. You don't know if you're going to survive. Today I'm going to inform you about the misuse of antibiotics, infectious diseases, and the growing ineffectiveness of our tools to treat them. I will educate you on how the government should be persuaded to better support the Center for Disease Control and establish guidelines concerning antibiotic overusage and reward new antibiotic research with money allocation. I have reviewed both sides of the antibiotic issue and the growing disparity in the tools and research and financial costs. I believe that the impact of our health outweighs the financial cons of the research and cost against pharmaceutical companies and the animal farming profit margins. First, I'll tell you ways in which it has been misused by humans and medication, and then I'll tell you how agriculture has misused it, and then I will share some arguments that Medicare, farming, and the pharmaceutical companies face. Now I'd like to talk to you about why we use too many antibiotics, why it's bad, and about superbugs. According to Marcia Clement's article, The Emerging Infectious Disease, we thought that we had all but wiped out infectious diseases about 50 years ago, but we are almost on the brink of a post-biotic world once again. Antibiotics have become ineffective for several reasons. Penicillin was first overutilized to keep our World War II GIs in combat. 3 in 100 troops had fallen ill due to venereal disease, gonorrhea. Because they were considered combat casualties, penicillin was widely released according to the documentary film Resistance. Some strains of gonorrhea were killed by the penicillin, and some survived and grew stronger. As of 2015, there's a strain of antibiotic-resistant gonorrhea that is completely pan-resistant. Yes, Grandpa ruined casual sex for everyone. Let's also talk about the misuses of antibiotics in agriculture and how it started. Antibiotics are misused in animal farming. Antibiotics are used in low doses as a disease prevention method on animals that aren't even sick. This practice creates a condition to grow a stronger bug. The antibiotic in low doses eliminates the weaker microorganisms and allows for stronger organisms to thrive. The runoff from these farms can spread to nearby vegetable farms and spread illnesses such as E. coli. The meat that carries the microorganisms treated with low-dose antibiotics is served to humans for consumption, according to the CDC.gov website in their drug resistance section. The bacteria resides in the animal's gut, which then in turn spreads to our own stomachs. Understanding CAFOs, also known as concentrated animal feeding operations, large-scale farming projects. It was discovered in producing tetracycline, there was a mash byproduct. The mash byproduct was given to animals as a cheap feed. They found that the cheap feed from the tetracycline byproduct produced larger animals, and they didn't know why it happened, but they started using it. Now I'm going to share some arguments against spending and stopping usage in agricultural medicine. There are some arguments against stopping widespread antibiotic use in hospitals, farming, and then spending more money in research. Modern procedures require antibiotics for safety. Open heart surgery, childbirth, or simply sanitizing tools. There are things that are non-negotiable for using antibacterial or antibiotic methodology. However, with responsible prescription practices, hospitals and clinics should continue to use these methods, but not without further training from the CDC. Farmers argue that antibiotics are not economically a necessity, and the data is skewed to make its usage look bad. The larger the meat yield and the healthier the animal is held, combats the razor-thin profit margins that they earn. They argue that although they use 80% of the antibiotics in our country, you aren't going to give a 2,500-pound bull the same amount of antibiotics that you give an 8-pound baby. However, a growing market of safer meat consumption does exist that they could utilize, such as the national food market Whole Foods. In 2010, they pledged to never serve antibiotic meat again, and that's now a viable option for farmers. It isn't worth the money to research a new pill. Is that a good argument? Most treatments are still empirical, and that means that it isn't, the meaning is that we just basically guess what pill will work for what sickness. There is no peg A that fits in a slot B when it comes to antibiotics and microorganisms. Developmental cost doesn't always yield a return. For example, in 50 years, Viagra is still going to be Viagra. It's not going anywhere, but there's not going to be another Alexander Fleming to invent penicillin again. And there's not going to be another person to just donate it like he did. This is where we need a government bond or support or reallocation from larger budgets like the national defense to go towards creating antibiotics. So what do we do with this knowledge in a postbiotic world? First, I told you the human factors of antibiotic viability. Then I talked about its misuse in the farmlands. Finally, I've revealed some obstacles in the way of us evolving out of the problem. So start small by taking antibiotics only when absolutely necessary. Verify your meat sources for lack of antibiotic usage. Let's contact our local and state government and suggest a more aggressive spending towards antibiotic research. So the butt story was true. And this time the bathing suit customer did live. But we are seeing more deaths due to infections, more deaths than AIDS and HIV every year. So thank you for listening.